I want to thank you so much for listening, tuning in, subscribing. We are on iTunes, yes, and you can subscribe to the show. What's excellent about that is you have the opportunity to listen at your own convenience. You know, whether you're taking walks in the morning, going to the gym, whether you're sitting in the office. So if you subscribe to the podcast, it will automatically download to whatever, like if you're an Apple, you'll get it in the podcasting section. If you are on other devices, Android, they have applications that are what we kind of call in the business podcatchers. And you can download that. And again, at your convenience, listen to us. Today with me is the founder of pixeLobby. And look I'm trying to muscle my way in, Cindy. And,
yeah, that's all right.
and co-host, that's where it meant to come from the pixeLobby podcast, Cindy Wilkerson. Hi, Cindy.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here and excited to have our new guest, and I'll let Brian introduce our guest.
Well, you know, we interviewed Nathan Wilkerson last week, and it was really neat to have somebody with some different disciplines and different backgrounds than what us normally we're on here talking about, photographers and things like that. Well, in this case, we have a gentleman who is not only a photographer, but he is an engineer. I think I read he's also a software engineer and a meteorologist and surf reporter. We have Nathan Cool with us. Thank you, Nathan, for joining us.
Hello, glad to be here.
Wonderful. So I tried to preface it with all of these caveats of this multifaceted, let's call it career that you have, all these different things. Do you want to give us maybe a little brief history and description of the life of Nathan Cool?
Sure. Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. Obviously, loved photography since I was a little kid, always had a camera. Didn't get into it really professionally until just a few years ago. I figured maybe that'd be something I would do when I would semi-retire. So for about 30 years, I've been a software engineer, and partway through that, so I could plan my own sessions out in the water in Southern California, I took up forecasting surf, and then eventually it took off, got popular, and I started working for a surfing magazine part-time, so I've been doing that. And then in my spare time, I was still then doing some photography, and now I'm kind of migrating out of engineering, not doing as much with that, doing more with the forecasting. And then now more and more and more with the photography, trying to stay away from weddings as much as I can.
Don't we all?
but it's hard if I want to make money not to do that. So, but that's kind of where it all kind of fits in. So I've had kind of a different background from some of the engineering background. Using AutoCAD quite a bit made it a lot easier then to do the post-processing, come up with Photoshop. And so from the artistic side of it, that kind of worked. And also then the physiology side. So I'd been a personal trainer many years ago, and then also very much drawn to the human form, lines, angles, things of that nature. So started doing a lot of then fitness photography, and that kind of got this niche involved, and I started being known as the guy up here in Ventura County that does the fitness photography. And so for people that are competing and whatnot, I got called. So it's kind of this little niche photography area that I got into that required a lot of also Photoshop, not necessarily to enhance the human form, but just everything else around it, because it's kind of like rock and roll type stuff. It's not your typical day at the park type of photography. So.
And your fitness photography is really spectacular.
Thank you.
It's really, and what I really enjoyed was seeing some of your mathematical equations done into the digital art combined with your artwork. It was just really pretty impressive. But I come from a very geeky home. So you were talking about AutoCAD there, and my husband also is proficient in the AutoCAD. And what I'm curious about is, do you ever implement it in your work too? Do you pull your stuff into AutoCAD and do anything in there, and then bring it back and forth, vice versa, whatever?
Not really, but what I've done is more or less the same type of operations that I want to do. So with Photoshop, being able to say, okay, I want to be able to take right angle lines. So I want to be able to make sure that stuff lines up. So one of the things that's always amazing, people are kind of amazed at what they actually have as far as angles out of their own body and where things actually form, because we are symmetrical to some degree. We're proportioned to some degree. So I'll know that, okay, if I want to make an arc, I would do it similar in many ways that I would do in AutoCAD, that I would do it in Photoshop. So instead of like maybe using the pen tool, I might actually use a circle and cut half of that. It's a little bit easier to resize stuff in Photoshop too, and then of course I can get a better resolution out of it. So I've kind of stayed away from the AutoCAD and just gone straight in. I used to have to use AutoCAD more for to be able to interface with other types of machines, but because the output then would go to automatic milling, drilling machines, and then that got me into the software engineering side of things, where I was. Then of course lately that's all I've done. I haven't touched really AutoCAD for 15 years or 20 years or something like that for work. So it's been heavily on the post-process side of if I have to do lines and angles. But yeah, I did a whole series called Mathematica, and it's where people were kind of surprised, like, is that real math? And it's like, yeah, I don't know most of it. I really don't. I know the concept. I watch Star Trek a lot, and so I'd pick out the words, I'd Google it, and it's like, there's a formula for it. That looks really cool, and I'm going to put that in there. So that's where a lot of the, like you were saying, it's like, oh, to be able to integrate some of that in there. But I kept it true to form, except for a couple where I put some hidden things in. For instance, in fitness photography, they build up the shoulder, so there's the deltoids, and a lot of the fitness people don't realize where that name comes from, the Greek delta character. So I'd throw that symbol in there, and oh, that's really cool. And it's like, yeah, but I put it by your shoulder just to say that that's your deltoids. That's all there was. It wasn't mathematically correct at all. That's all. So,
my husband is also Nathan, and we just interviewed him the week before, and he's also an artist, and so, but he's not a photographer. Like, I'm the photographer, you're a photographer, so he was saying that it's more vectored art versus the non-vectored, and stuff like that. So it's really intriguing listening to how you use it. Do you find that it has helped you to understand Photoshop better by knowing it or not?
Oh, definitely so. So the basic photos that a lot of the fitness people would want have to have the basic stuff of dodge and burn and whatnot. Now, they could, if they were going to make a Z card or just any of their headshots, or what they would do for one of their sponsors, like wearing some of their outfits and then of course showing a lot of muscle, requires a lot of shadow work. So first off, there's always a lot of, hey, you got to do something completely different than the Walmart lighting. You have to picture lighting. You have to actually have high lighting. Come down across them. You got to be careful with rim lighting. You can't put too much fill into it. But then when you do that, you're kind of stuck with some results that are like, oh man, well, I missed that completely, because it just gets so iffy. You move 1 inch away from the light and things change. So always shoot in RAW, and then I can post-process that to add a little bit more light in, but then more so, like especially with the women, I'll be using like maybe an 85mm Nikon lens, and there's just so much detail that comes out of that puppy. It's like there's too much detail, so there's always going to be skin softening, that has to be done. And especially for anything that's done for a sponsor, they don't want the real thing. If it's an actor, it's like, yeah, they want the headshot, they don't want all that type of stuff. But for everything else, you have to. So it's like, okay, well, how do I soften the skin with making it look real? So back originally when I was learning Photoshop, I must have gone through, I don't know, 15, 20 different tutorials till I found one that, oh, this kind of works best, and so, thank goodness for Google. I can, find just about anything. But then there was a lot of things too, like just even I want to do non-destructive work on it. So it's like a fitness photo for somebody might have easily a dozen layers into it, so I can have the right amount of levels or contrast in just the right places that I want. Being able to put gradient maps on to make sure that their skin tones even. People will come in and they can have some tan lines or some uneven skin tones for whatever reason. so that always has to be, marked up, and then I might have to take out some scratches or scars. I've had quite often people come in with bruises from the gym, and it's like you can't have to have that removed. So there's been
I totally get it. My husband also was a bodybuilder, and he would model for like Brigham Young University and for different places like that. And so when it came to photography, I've done a little dabbling, not as much as you, with the fitness photography, and it's really quite spectacular to watch the body, and like you said, the angles, and how just the different angles and the different lighting. But you seem to be quite a master at it, and so I was just all excited. Where do you get your ideas for posing them?
That's a good question. So sometimes people will come to me and they'll have pictures on their phone that they've saved. So a lot of the people that especially compete, they'll be like, oh, I would like to have a picture like this, and I'll kind of get an idea, because it's like you can never take the exact picture of it. But then the other part of it, I kind of worked into like this. I'm a high drama type of photographer. I like something that's like the old acting, Greek stuff, and so I think about like statuesque type stuff and get people to pose. And so I remember I was in one group and they were reviewing some pictures, and people were like, oh, I don't like the hands, because the hands would look like claws. And it's like, well, to me that shows anger, that shows so I did this massive amount of drama, and so I'd get people to kind of do that. And
what about Arnold? I mean, he had his do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
You guys remember Arnold Schwarzenegger and his poses? And if you follow fitness photography and fitness, I'm sure you've been to bodybuilding, whatever. They have their little hook.
Yeah, exactly.
So that would make sense. It makes sense how you would have a claw in there, and it's massive. That's interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, yeah, no problem at all. I think there's also a kind of a crossover with like fitness bodybuilders and heavy metal type of rock and roll, things with wings and angels and stuff. So when you emulate that type of thing, like claws, like from a bird, or the pose where you can actually see what would be wings spreading, then obviously then in some of the pictures for them, I'll actually put wings on them and stuff like that. But I think a lot of it just kind of comes from that, and not to criticize the people in the fitness industry, but they're usually different from regular models in that they don't know how to move through. Like when I work with a fashion model, it's boom, 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 boom. Just talk about a series, and you're just clicking off as fast as you can go, and they know between each click to go ahead and change. With a fitness person, they're used to getting on stage. There's a certain pose that they have to have right down to the millimeter, for acceptance for the judges. So they're not used to then smoothly moving. So what I'll do is I'll move them through something, and then we'll try it again, do it again. And I found that if I use a tripod with that, and I'm away from the back of the camera, they actually watch me like I'm their mirror, and I'm moving, along with them, and they kind of get that in place. And so I might have spent 2 hours, but only get about 10 or 15 good shots of what we're trying to do. And then, of course, I'll use high-speed strobes. I'm using Einstein's, so I can get a real fast flash duration. So during their movement of whatever they're doing, I can kind of freeze them. So it wouldn't be necessarily their final pose, but I'm getting something where I see it's like, oh, as they're moving, their chest is starting to open. I'm starting to get striations in the shoulder, and so boom, let's try that again, and boom, and then eventually that kind of then falls into, everybody's a little bit different, but I guess long story short, that's that's where I get some of my inspiration from.
No, that's great. Do you work primarily in the studio, or do you take them out in nature as well?
I love to shoot indoors. I love to have no light but my own, and some of that comes from at my age having just a little bit of shake too. So if I can shoot indoors and I'm using strobes, I mean it's the flash duration that really matters. So if I'm at 1/5000th of a second, boom. When I'm outdoors, yeah, I've got to get up to, with a good sized lens on there, maybe to 500th of a second, maybe 400th of a second. And I live in ISO 100 because a lot of this stuff gets blown up, real large. I don't want noise. So outside kind of makes it tough, but when I have done outside, I'll use some portable power, maybe a beauty dish. Like I've done some pool shots. Obviously, I can't do those inside. So get a good location, get that set up, and then sometimes I'll use a monopod. I'm not real shaky or anything like that, where I couldn't, but I definitely have to shoot at 200th of a second. And here I am in the middle of the day trying to overpower the sun, but I still have found like I can use the Einsteins outside. They go up to about 640 watt seconds. Try to use the sun as a backlight, but I can still get wherever the fill would be or the direct light isn't hitting, maybe sometimes a little bit of camera shake on it. So I have to be a lot more careful. And then, of course, I love air conditioning. We've done such a great job with indoors, over the last 10,000 years. So I love it.
Well, I think that the mood, being able to create your own mood lighting, really does help and stuff. Now, when you're doing your fitness, Brian, you can have the next question. I'm sorry.
You're doing great. You're doing great, Cindy. Just keep it. The only comment I want to throw in is when we made mention of people are symmetrical. I'm personally kind of elliptical. But go ahead, Cindy. You got it. You're doing great.
What I was wondering was, when you're dealing with your clients, do they come in having a requirement, or do they allow you to have your artistic flow? Do they say, I need a shot just like this, this, and this, or do they kind of let you have your little artistic freedom?
A lot of times it's left up to me with kind of the artistic freedom, a lot of liberties I can go to there, but they'll usually have something like, okay, this is after a show, for instance, so they'll be all prepped, and they know that they want a certain series of pictures, but they might not know exactly what. For instance, sometimes even for the sponsors, they know that, yeah, the sponsor just wants something. Just something, so because a lot of times they'll be like, okay, we're giving you product or whatever for sponsorship. Then the agreement is, you have to post so many a day or so many a week on just Facebook, so they can post just about, anything that they want. It wouldn't actually be for a print magazine. So most of the time I have some flexibility, and even if they have an idea, I get to throw in my flair, quite often with it. So pretty rare just for the commercial stuff. If it is, like some people will need, I just need a complete commercial stuff for my portfolio just to show it. It's like, okay, this is boring. Put on whatever it is you're wearing and smile. And hey, white background, high key to a certain extent, just flood it out. And it's like, next picture, that's fine. So
now they come after they do, or do you have some come before their events too? The reason I ask is I had done a shoot. It's been, I think it was in 2009, and it was right before a competition, and he was down to about 2% body fat.
Yeah.
And it was really quite an interesting experience for those who have not shot bodybuilding and stuff. They really work hard, and their body's already quite strained, and so holding a pose for a certain amount of time can wipe them out really quick and stuff. What do you have to say on that?
Oh, definitely. And so one of the problems, that's why they usually don't like to shoot before the competition, because they'll be weak. But then after the shoot, they think that, oh, since I went down, I've got paper thin skin, I'm all vascular and down to, like you said, single digit body fat, that they can just all of a sudden go to in and out. And it's like, don't do that before the shoot. So I have recommendations, for instance, on my website form. It's like, here's the prep instructions, and one of the things is to eat very light the morning of. Don't drink a lot of water, but you can't also be dehydrated, during the shoot, because they will probably burn those calories during it. Because like you said, holding a pose, it's like they'll be on and I'll be like flex, 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 snap, and I'm telling them also what to flex, what they're not doing, and everything. Because I'm playing like their mirror once again, and most people are surprised, especially the people, the non-competitors, and they want to get into something with sponsors. They want to get some fitness stuff, and they're usually amazed halfway through the shoot how tired they are, because it's usually about 2 hours, sometimes 3. And like I said, there's a lot of work on their part to make it happen.
Well, there really is. I remember this particular person. He really wanted his, I don't know the exact muscles. I think it was his lats and stuff that he wanted pinpointed and different things like that. But to get the look and everything, it really was quite a struggle on both ends. So that's interesting. Now, how about surfing? Because you are a meteorologist.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm curious is, do you ever pull that into your fitness and stuff, bringing in the surfers as well?
Some of the guys that I've shot actually do surf, because I live in Southern California, so it's kind of like part of their sport, that they would do. But there's kind of a whole realm of surf photography that I never got into. I don't want to criticize anybody that gets into it, but for me it was never really artistic. There was nothing really too much, especially in Southern California at the beach, that was scenic. Yeah, you might catch a sunset. You do that once. It's like there's a palm tree, and then the rest of it's like there's a whole lot of water. It's like there's not much you can do with that. There's underwater stuff, whatever, and I do some stuff just in my little studio here for local art. But for the ocean itself, the only thing that's really attractive nowadays, especially, is people that are in the water with GoPros, or they have somebody on a boogie board with a camera that's in a casing, and they're doing stuff that way and going underwater, and there's people that specialize in just that. So I've kind of just stayed away from it. It's especially for the really good shots, you're in dangerous conditions. It's out of my realm of safety. So like I said, I love the indoors. I do love surfing, but the photography side is kind of like stayed away from that.
That was really the first kind of photographer I ever wanted to be.
Oh wow!
Back in the early days, I actually could pull off wearing a wetsuit, and I surfed and that. And that was, I wanted to work for, Surfer Magazine and stuff. I live here in Southern California as well. So my hangout was anywhere from, Huntington Beach all the way down to maybe San Clemente, or maybe a little further south. But that's what I wanted to do. And certainly, do you remember when they came out with those issues about the photographers, and they literally would have their noses broken 5-6 times. The wave would hit, the camera would smash them, a board would hit them. So I understand where you're coming from with this. Indoors is safe.
Exactly. And just to get the shot, it's like, I don't know. It's not really my thing. I've had also, it seems to be popular to want to have engagement photos or family photos done at the beach. And, it's like, I get a lot of salt mist on my lens. I don't want to change lenses near the sand. I guess I'm wimpy in that way, but there's only a certain amount of artistic, ability that you have at the beach. And it's like, I hope no one else is there. You want to go during the week? No, everybody's working, so they can't shoot on the week. They want to go on the weekend, and everybody else is there.
You could always come up here to Washington, because I am a beach photographer, and we don't have hardly anybody on some of our beaches, so it's really nice. And I do switch my lenses on there, but I do see the point why you wouldn't want, because you have to have your camera cleaned a lot more frequently. So you're smart, and you're saving yourself and your cameras from not doing it. Did you have some questions, Brian, for him?
Well, yeah. You talked an awful lot about his fitness photography. I was really interested in some of your, I think you kind of categorize it as fantasy, or where you're doing some of the deconstruction of the body parts and stuff. I enjoyed looking at your work.
Oh, thank you.
In that sense, can you take us down a little bit of the road of the thought process you go through when creating some of those images?
Oh yeah, sure. it's I guess it's a type of, anatomy that kind of has drawn me to it. It's somewhat surreal. I've always felt that, going through life, you're kind of in control of your own, destiny. And people that, for instance, do the bodybuilding, they're in control of their own fitness, their own body, and how it actually forms into that. But for most people, I've always felt like, well, the body itself is kind of what you have genetically. This is what it is, but are you actually in control of it? And then, of course, there's the thing about just control through life itself. So that's where I started getting into some of the stuff with like puppets. It's like, are you really being pulled through life? Is this really you? Are these your decisions? Are you in control of yourself? So to try to, it was kind of a little hidden, I wouldn't say message, but kind of an undertone or maybe motivation of the control, not in control, not just in what I look like, but also who I am and what I do. So it was a matter then of, what would happen, not to be then, grotesque of, tearing, totally deconstructing, but what would be something that would be it wouldn't show violence. It would be something, though, that still could show that, I love sci-fi too, and the idea of, androids,
Right.
you peel back the skin a little bit and you actually see, what's actually behind that. So that all kind of came together and I still just love doing it. Sometimes I'll get an idea. It's like, oh, that would look probably cool like that. And then halfway through it, maybe I'll realize it's not. But
Well, even looking at your image where your eyes are turned around and looking inside your head, it could be interpreted in so many ways. Look inside my mind, and and such. I think there's a lot of thought that you put in, and I may be wrong. You can tell me, but it seems like you are very thoughtful in your entire process. You want to walk us through that a little bit?
yeah, it depends on. There's usually something going on, some other type of theme that I'm thinking of, and I sketch out a couple things, and then it usually starts coming together. And the Photoshop part of it's usually about the easiest part. It's usually come up with an idea, and like you said, the face turned around. I'd seen other people do stuff like this, where it's like you become blocks, and maybe blocks being put together. But there was also like a period where it was all about the eyes, and it was all about, is this really what I'm seeing as myself? And of course, needing glasses more and more, changing my prescription as I get older. So I started doing this one whole series of just different things with eyes that were in the wrong place on the head, eyes that might have been closed. Like I did one, it was called a synesthesia, where for the eyes I had then put in my actual mouth, and then there was an eye where my mouth should be, and so changing of the senses, and this is how it's affecting me. So then I started just doing a whole series. Every time I would think of something related to how I'm seeing, how I'm feeling, then I'd write a little note, and it's like because you start one, it's kind of like cleaning the house. It's like once you start, you clean the counter a little bit, all of a sudden you got the vacuum out, you're doing everything. And so I'll start on one thing with one idea, and then after a while it's like other ideas just come to me later, and I start kind of down a road of a whole series, like that.
I've always said that I feel like artists in general are expressing their emotions through their art. Do you find it that way, or is it just concepts that come to mind? I'm currently working on themes with my children, but in that I'm still finding there's emotion that is helping guide me. And you're a man, so hearing that from a man might be cool too. Do you find your emotions are being expressed as an outlet for your emotions too?
Nathan, just to say no.
Well, I guess some of it is because, like, for instance, I do some of the multiplicity pictures, and those are when I'm in a really good mood and a funny mood. And like I had this where there's many of me running from something, like the famous T-Rex wedding picture. I did one of myself, but I did one where my wife, she had this childhood teddy bear, and she dug it out, and it's missing an eye. The thing's older than dirt, right? But she wanted a nice picture of it, and I was like, oh, okay, when you come home from work, I'll have a nice picture of it. So broke out everything, and I took just pictures of that, and then I that's, can I put that? And I'm running away in this smoky factory of lightning coming down and this giant teddy bear chasing, 10 of me. And of course, I was just in a great mood that day. And so it's like, and I thought that, oh, she's just going to love this. But also some of it was like, ha, 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 you want a picture? Wait, be careful what you ask for. But then there's times where I'll be a little bit frustrated with stuff. And so like some of the eye pictures, that was where, I'm feeling a little bit, bad about, getting older, all the different things. This is how I'm kind of able to express myself with it. So there's sometimes I think it's not necessarily the emotion, but kind of my mood more so that then drives it. And then sometimes just because I see it's like, oh, that turned out good, and I got some good techniques there, and then I just come up with other ideas there, even though later I'm working on things for a series. It started with a mood or an emotion, but it just continued on, even though I might have felt better later. So.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brian, because you didn't like that question.
Well, you were bringing up the man-woman thing, That's all,
Yeah,
that's all fun. Nathan, are there any, photographers or artists out there that are your kind of heroes or inspiration?
I'd say for fitness, I would say Brett Seeley. He's kind of real well known, and he does nothing that's ultra fancy. He's done a variety of stuff. The thing I like about Brett is he seems to have a great rapport with a lot of his clients, and he travels all over the place, which is great for him too. It's something I won't do. I'm not going to be hopping on planes and. So, but everywhere he goes, he's able to really connect, with the people, and I think that's such an important thing. I mean, there's art, side of like the fitness, and then there's his side of the fitness, which there's some art to it, but he's really capturing the person, in so many ways. And so I think that on his connected level, that he does that. And I'm connected to a lot of other photographers on Facebook, and I can't for the life of me think of anybody's name at the moment, but I'm connected to so many that I make sure they're at the top when I see their stuff come in.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working with your customers, do you find it difficult to have a conversation with someone you just meet, or are you pretty open? Because a lot of people, when they'll come to myself, and I talk about myself because that's where I'm pulling this from.
Sure.
But when I've seen other photographers and they joke and they have fun, and you know what, I am boring. So it's interesting to see how different people do it. For me, I kind of get in my little zone, and I am like a paparazzi in the midst, watching an event, and I noticed, and I warn people too before. I'm like, dude, I'm boring. If you really want me, I'm going to tell you what to do and stuff, but don't expect me to entertain you. So, can you kind of tell us what it would be like, to be your client?
Well, one of the first things, everybody has expectations before they arrive. So whether it's by phone or through email or messaging on Facebook, usually I have a pretty good idea of what they're wanting, and everybody, almost everybody, is nervous when they show up because it's, they're going to have somebody take their picture, and they don't know how it's going to look. And so I usually try to just put them at ease first, and during the first 10 minutes or so, just talking to them. I have books of examples, of work I've done, or I might take them on the web and show them some things and talk about what we're going to do. And then the first thing I do is I just run them through and tell most of them, it's like, especially if they're really nervous, the first half hour is going to be a throwaway. This is just practice. And that starts loosening them up even more. It's like, oh, okay, well, there's no risk involved, here with that. But the other big thing I've found is the encouragement along the way. And so as they're going along, give them encouragement. If I start seeing them too nervous, I really start going up to them with the camera and show them, look how good this one, I love this one, and why I love it. You did a great job with this. And so constant interaction with them. And then the other thing is getting out from behind the camera. So even if I don't have the camera on a tripod, quite often I'll put it down and I'll step up to them and I'll say, okay, imagine I'm you, and this is what we're going to do. And then I'll start doing some funny stuff. I get to be a little animated sometimes, and especially with the women, to accentuate the S curve, I do what I call the hip swag dance, and it's where my hips are being jutted out to the side to get that S curve. And they say me doing that, and of course that just looks completely silly. It loosens them up, and as they get into doing the hip swag, doing the S curve, and it's like, bam, there you got it, and then so it builds up to eventually then by the end of the session with the most nervous people, they're usually very, very open. And for families, it can be tough, especially if there's kids involved, for the small events, that I do. But try to keep them lively, and if it's a fairly large group, I'll bring my wife along, and she loves kids, so she'll keep them smiling as much as we can. And of course, the biggest thing with that I found is don't just engage the family as much as you can before shooting, get things going, and then if they've got those kids, it's about 45 minutes to an hour. Make it quick, but you already know all the stuff planned ahead of time, what we're moving to next. And for instance, I had this one shoot. It was for last Christmas or 2 Christmases ago, and I had this family, and we were rushed for time, for daylight. Everything was running late, and so I got everything on a tripod, and I'm then trying to get everybody to laugh, and they've got 2 dogs now, of all things, too, and I'm trying to get them. So I just leave the camera on a tripod, use a wireless remote, and I'm just dancing back and forth, doing some crazy stuff, and it's like, that's looking good, and I'm trying to do imitation stuff, and after a while, everybody's laughing, and I take enough pictures, and of course, it's on a tripod where not everybody was smiling, but in some pictures they were, so people had their heads and eyes and mouths changed out until they finally had this nice big print that they gave to their parents on a printed canvas. So.
See, Cindy, you need a personality.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. We won't go there.
So Nathan, I got one for you before Cindy jumps in and
No,
grabs
go
you
ahead.
again.
Sure.
Your photography as well as your Photoshop work, are you self-trained, or did you go to any school or to learn your craft?
Just completely self-trained. Completely self-trained. I always had such a love for it, so reading a lot of magazines, and it's like, how does that done? Google, 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 and then realizing, oh, I need better gear for this. Oh, I need this type of lens, or oh, I need this type of light, and then of course, in a lot of trial and error of bought this, well, that's going on eBay, and
Yeah.
and then it just really trying to watch a lot of others, but I never really had any formal training.
Wow, that's pretty good, because your work is fantastic for
Thank you.
self-trained.
Thank you.
Go
Now,
ahead.
did I see you did a water droplet just recently, a mirrored water droplet? Is that correct?
Yeah, so it was a series of ice thrown into a tank of water with colored paper underneath of it. And then I used a strong Einstein. I was shooting at like f11. And so there was enough light that would hit the colored paper under the tank and go back into the splashes. And then I would take a bunch of those and I'd rotate them, mirror them, and edit those together.
Very, very cool. And I saw that, and I'm sitting there going, now I've seen a few of those go around, but you did a really well job with that. And,
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
And I think we missed this in the beginning, if I can jump back, but you're also author of a book.
That's right. That's right. I've written a few books. And the 2 that are the most popular, there's one, it's a surf forecasting guide. And it's kind of like, okay, if you want to do your own surf forecasting, this is an easy how-to. And then the other was on climate change. There's a couple others, like during, I don't know how many bottles of wine, I wrote a bunch of poetry on the ocean and put it up there. And another one was done for my family. It was all about our childhood, growing up. But then, yeah, the one on climate change, since I was doing a lot of surf forecasting, I got into it 2 years before the strong El Nino of '97.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing, actually I started commercial forecasting in '96, and in '97 also I'm getting hit with what? I didn't know what was going on. And so people were asking me, do you think this is related to global warming? I'm like, global what? And so I started digging more into it. And then after a while, it's like all the stuff that I'm finding and all the questions, I started writing a blog, and I started saving some of that, and then some of the papers that I was saving. I was a member of the American Meteorological Society, and so I quickly joined the the Association for Advancement of Science, AAAS. So I was able to get access to a lot of their papers as well. And so after a period of about a year writing some blogs on this for, at the time, it was Wet Sand, which got sold to Surfing Magazine. And it was like, I think I've got enough here for a book. So that's when I put that together. And then still today, that was about 10 years ago, I now go down, it's about twice a year, to Loyola Marymount, and I talk to the environmental sciences class. And it's usually 2 different classes. One's on the surf forecasting book, and the other's on the climate change book. Because I kind of give a on the climate change, it's this a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, try to stay away from the bias as much as possible. So it's kind of more of an academic perspective than it is media worthy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's interesting because in photography, I didn't realize how important weather would be to it, and especially if you're indoors, and like you said, you do enjoy indoors. But I'm grateful you're a meteorologist because I rely on the weather. I never, I thought it was the funniest thing. I married a man who he was born a farmer, and they're always involved in knowing what the weather was. And I thought, this is the kookiest family I married into. And, forgive me, people that I'm related to, but I really thought that they were really kooky and how much they had weather reports and the weather almanac and all this fun stuff. And I rely on it. I rely on it almost daily for all my shoots, especially my shoots on the beaches and the rivers. And I have to know when the tides come in and then when the tides are going out. And all these things I would never have wanted to know, and I do know.
Right.
Anyway, you had mentioned El Nino, and I had just recently read a little bit about El Nino coming up again. Are we at that point again?
Oh yeah, definitely. In fact, I've been putting together for Surfing Magazine a monthly video that shows a breakdown of what's going on, and I really try to stay away from the hype zone, but I get blamed for it. But the reason I'm getting blamed for it is because there's a very strong El Nino signal that's really building right now. So we're seeing something that we haven't seen since 1997, and even then. It's not that the El Nino signal is stronger, but there's other things in the North Pacific that could actually accentuate the signal. But it's putting us into very unknown territory. In fact, this just made this whole summer just a nightmare for forecasting surf conditions, because now there's this bizarre hurricane that not all the models are picking up. It could be Ignacio that coming off the coast of Mexico. Some models are showing this thing being so massive, fueled by El Nino waters, where other models aren't even hardly showing it, and it's because we're in such unknown territory at this point. But there's very, very strong signal that this could be a very strong El Nino this year. And so, yeah, of all things on top of it, it's like, okay, great. Now my surf forecasting job, I get paid the same either way, but now it's just becoming, all the more difficult. I wish I got paid by the hour. So.
Well, then you right after El Nino, you have La Nina, right?
Right, and it depends. Like a El Nino could last a couple years. Usually, it no more than about 18 months. But we have been in an El Nino since last year. It just wasn't a very strong signal, and now the signal is very strong. In fact, tomorrow they'll be issuing more details about that. Once a month, the second Thursday of every month, they issue.
Would you mind elaborating on that strong signal? Because, like I said, and for those that are not involved in the outdoor photography, you might not realize to what extent this does affect you. And where I'm on the beach and in the rivers and on the beach all the time, my client's safety is first and foremost. And so knowing how strong the riptides are and how unpredictable the ocean is, or the rivers, and the strengths of the currents and such are all directly related to me, because my client's safety is first at all times, and that's why we rely on such things. Could you just touch on that a little bit? Would that be all right?
Oh, absolutely, and it's a good point too, because people can get used to shooting at a certain beach. They can get used to shooting at a certain location. They can know it's like, oh, yeah, there's going to be a storm, and this is usually what happens. But when you're up against an El Nino year, you're up against a big change. So obviously with El Nino, weather patterns just shift greatly. So for instance, in the Pacific Northwest, you might not see nearly as much rain this winter as Southern California will. So Southern California could get the bigger surf.
I'm like, yes. Last year we had floods. I mean, our house is 40 feet up off the beach, but I can walk over to the beach. That's how close I am. Nice. And but when the rivers flood and everything, we're landlocked. I mean, they have to life flight people out during. And last year we had flooding. It was intense, and I just thought, where the heck did I move? I just can't believe this. But anyway, go ahead. I'm grateful that it might be moving down, but I'm sorry for you guys. So
And
Oh,
being in
no,
Southern
it's yeah,
California, I'll do this as well. Yay, rain!
yes,
exactly.
go ahead.
Rain than what we'd like to have. And of course, a lot of it just runs out to the ocean, but we need it
Sure.
really, very, very bad. So, but, and of course, for everybody from my reading audience from Surfing Magazine, they're more interested. Hey, are we going to see the big surf like we saw in '97 and
Hmm.
in '90 during that winter, 1998 in January, up in Ventura? It was so strong it broke the end of the pier off. There was 25-foot breakers coming in, and so guys are like, hey, is there going to be a big wave riding that year? And it's like, yeah, and you can also have the major devastation that came along with it. So it's definitely a game changer and something that usually the local authorities are on top of. For instance, sections of the coast were shut down because the waves were actually crushing rocks and breaking them over onto the Pacific Coast Highway. It was such strong surf. So in those conditions, usually someone's there, but you definitely need to be careful. There's always going to be a chance of rip currents, in the wintertime, especially in Southern California because of the winter surf. But during El Nino, you could have such strong westerly swells, where they're coming in more directly. Basically, the jet stream lowers in latitude and drives those storms. Is a changing, big change up. So when it comes to the winter time, and if somebody's drawn to try to, for one, take the pictures of the big surf, get a telephoto lens and stay at a good distance. don't try to park at the beach. And for those that want to shoot on the beach, really watch your tides, because you might go for low tide, but also rip currents are accentuated as the tide goes out also. So you want to make sure you stay close from the water's edge. And this would be one of those winters where take a lot of precaution. There could also be a lot of debris on the beach too. When these storms come in, they're very powerful. So something to watch out for your clients and for yourself. Last thing you want to be doing is walking backwards, shooting a couple walking down the beach, and all of a sudden you trip over and there goes all your gear,
Well, and that's, you had mentioned, about the currents and the waves that are coming in. You also have your sleeper waves, which I believe is, and I think those tend to pop up more. I've noticed a lot more, and I've been having my clients farther away from the water, and you get to know when it's safer and not so safe, when it's pulling your beach down and stuff. But then you just kind of want to back off a little bit. But those are all great. I'm grateful that you do that as well as the other. Now, how does it affect like sharks and stuff like that? Do you see more during El Nino or less?
Well, it's interesting. We've had, whenever El Nino happens, it's not just the weather that changes, but also the upwellings and downwellings. So entire ecosystems get shifted. So when you have a good upwelling, you've got a really good food chain going on, really good food web. When you don't, you've got a downwelling, just the opposite happens.
Right.
So we've been having problems in Southern California. There was was it about a month and a half ago, a massive die-off of tuna crabs, by the millions, all over San Diego beaches. And we've had die-offs of seals, dolphin, seabirds, and all that's been happening. So we've also seen, because the food web has been shifting location, some of the problems with the pupping grounds for the great whites. And so like off of Hermosa, up by LAX and all that, off those waters in Santa Monica Bay, it's a known pupping ground for great whites, and they usually get up to 6 feet, and then they leave and go out to deeper water. Well, a lot of them have been staying now for longer. Not exactly known why, if that's because of the food web shifting, but also off Huntington Beach. They actually shut Huntington Beach down a few weeks ago for a couple of days because of great white sightings. Now, no one's gotten hit, right now, but there is that fear, and it's bizarre up in Ventura waters, seeing 70+ degree. It's like that's just spooky to me. That's like being outside, and you hear that clear sound of it, when a tornado's on the horizon type of thing. Well, getting in warm water in Ventura is that same type of chill going up my spine. Like something is not right here. Something's about to happen. It's going to be very, very bad. So. I've been staying clear of the water a lot because of the warmth. You'd think you'd want to get in it more. It's like, I don't know about this.
Yeah. Well, you have such a plethora of, I guess, talents, and for lack of the right word, talents and interests. There we go, interests and stuff. How do you pick one? I mean, how do you balance it all?
Well, I guess one of the things of having a multiple personality disorder is you only have one personality at a time. So
I love it.
well, the one thing, I have only certain hours a day that I do for the surf forecasting, certain hours of the day that I do for my day job, which now I only do about 20 hours a week for the software engineering. So I'm able to then schedule kind of my week ahead of time to know what I want to do. And if what time's on the weekend. So I'm able to kind of balance it, but it does kind of require a schedule and a discipline to know that tomorrow, it's hard to, I don't really wake up and go, oh, today I'm going to spend a little bit of time in the morning doing this, a little bit of time doing that. I kind of know that, most of the time I'll try to get all my work done early in the morning. So I get up real early, get all my, surf forecasting done I have to, any software that I have to write, get all that done. And I usually have then the whole afternoon and then evening to kind of pick and choose, what I want to do. So it is kind of a scheduled thing I have to go by.
Now, Nathan, do you have your own studio there?
No, I actually just use my house. So I've got some large ceilings in the front room, and I've got enough room there to where I can get. I use like the Savage paper, the 8-foot wide rolls, and so I'm able to get those up to a good, like 8 feet high on stands, 8 to 9 feet high. Then roll that out quite a bit, and then put lights around it. So. Able to move some furniture around to make that happen, and so I kind of got that down to a science for doing people shots like that. And then for anything small and detailed, I have a loft upstairs that is big enough. It works part-time as a gym, and then the rest of it I'll be able to set up other lights to just do detailed stuff, and it's out of the way, and I can leave that up for days. Where when I shoot inside the house, it's my wife usually doesn't like me to have it out for a couple of days, but
No, I understand. I think that's life of being the spouse of a photographer.
yeah,
They're always going, can I have my dining room table back?
exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
My equipment, yeah, my husband kind of pushes it into one corner, and I'm like, no, I need to spread out. So that's awesome. Do you have more, Brian, that you wanted to ask?
No. I think it's been a fantastic interview. Fascinating, again, from the perspective of photography as well as the meteorology and this discussion of El Nino. Again, very, very fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
We're really glad you said yes, and I've been looking forward to this, so I was just all tickled. I woke up today, no headache, and super happy to be here. I know, isn't that just wonderful? So woke up and I told the family, you all be quiet, because I need to be here, and it's really been great. Do you have any last things that you'd like to share with us? Any upcoming shoots that you're coming up with, or any things on the books that you'd like to share with us, or even books or coming out? Do you have anything new?
You know what? I'm going to be hopefully publishing a new book on surf forecasting in the next couple of years. Next year will mark my 20 years of doing it professionally, and so I'm looking at that. So you can always follow anything I'm doing lately on nathancool.com. You can also follow me on Facebook. I'm at Nathan Todd Cool, and Cool, it really is my last name. I swear I didn't make it up. And and on Nathan Todd Cool, you can follow me there personally. I've got a photography page there as well. I've got a website, but I'm posting stuff almost every couple of days. Sometimes multiple times a day there. So if you want to stay up on the latest, and I'm posting everything. I mean, it's not just my stuff on photography, but anything with El Nino, anything with surf forecasting, anything that happens to go through the mind of Nathan Todd Cool, it goes on my Facebook page.
Excellent.
So.
He's also, for those that are not aware, Nathan is one of our artists on pixeLobby,
Yep.
and so he had all the links to his pages. If you can't remember Nathan Cool, which is really easy to remember, you can still go to pixeLobby.com and look up our artists, and Nathan Cool is right there, and you can get to all of his links through pixeLobby. You can also see his YouTube channel and his Vimeo channel. So all of your videos are available there too. Also, his books are available. You can reach all of his books through pixeLobby.com.
And the most amazing, meaningful, in-depth video on his cat rolling over.
Oh yes, people don't believe that I could actually train a cat, and I proved them all wrong.
My kids would be impressed.
It took a year, but she now will roll over on command. So.
Awesome. Well, Nathan, thank you so much. As Cindy said, thank you so much for joining us. And all of the links to this will be in our show notes that will be available through, again, iTunes, or you go to the website, which is it's plpodcast.com. And you can see all the notes there as well as all of our shows. Again, thank you so much for listening, tuning in, subscribing to the show, and take a picture. It'll last longer.